We've tracked Fettel to an abandoned building just up ahead. No sign of enemy activity on the satellite, but don't take any chances. Jankowski, you in position?
Just say the word.
All right, move it out.
F.E.A.R. is about F.E.A.R, First Encounter Assault Recon, a secret unit dedicated to combating paranormal threats. F.E.A.R is called in to kill or capture Paxton Fettel, a telepathic commander escaped from custody. You play as Pointman, a person with abnormal reflexes. F.E.A.R's gameplay isn't only realistic with a superb AI, but also with the weapons and environment. F.E.A.R is a tactical first-person shooter, which works very great in a combination of realism and superb AI, which is almost human-like. And in combination with the slow-mo or reflexes, which gives you an edge in certain combat situations, and making the gameplay more intense. Makes F.E.A.R's gameplay one of the best gameplays to a game ever made, because of the combination with realism and tactics and slow-mo, which makes a great experience. They try to keep the gameplay interesting by adding new enemy types, but never really adding any new weapons. To be honest, they do a mediocre job of keeping the gameplay interesting, but the gameplay is already great to begin with. One of the things they could do to make it better would be to actually be able to interact with objects to make cover or such shit. Because the AI can do it, why can't you? They also reward the player for exploring, which is always a good thing in games. And like I said, why the gameplay is so good is because of if you're trying to flank the enemy or trying to do anything tactical, the enemy will react humanly to that. And because of the gameplay being so realistic, it really keeps you on the edge, especially on the hardest difficulty. I mean, always ready for anything, which helps the atmosphere in the game. And also the story, because of you're always on the edge. Of course, F.E.A.R is a horror game, but it isn't really a you're fighting for your life kind of horror game, but more like a couple of screamers and jump screams. But because of the gameplay being so realistic and keeping you on the edge all the time, it really makes the game more immersive and better. But eventually during the course of the gameplay might die a bit because it isn't really that much of a change of pacing. Like I said, the only thing they really do is add new enemy types, and you might stop being on the edge on all those scary scenes because they don't really lead to anything until it gets even more fucked up than there already is. The story, on the other hand, is an ordinary story that gives you bits and pieces you can think about and keep you hooked. You will notice really fast that some things aren't really as easy as it seems to be. I mean, it's more complex than it makes it out to be. I mean, it's not just some call to kidnap or capture or kill a telepathic commander. It's something much bigger. You will get more information during the course of the game, with interacting with computers or listening in on different telephone calls. The characters aren't really that big of an issue in this game. I mean, those characters that there are well, okay, good. It's not the best character ever made, but it's better than nothing. It's good for how the story is, let's just say so. They do explain the story in a great fucking way. You understand everything that's going on in the world and understand what gets you being very quickly, which is very good because it just makes you more time to live in this atmosphere that is one of the best things about the game, to be honest, the atmosphere, because its interaction with the game to being so realistic and makes those horror scenes, not really scary, but more intense than they are because you're always on the edge. One other thing that's very good is that they give you a lot of information to think about, and they of course confirms what it is. So and they make you can figure it out, but you still won't figure out the twist which comes later in the end, which is very fucking good as well, which strengthens the story even more than it already is. To be honest, it's actually one of the best stories ever made. Or maybe not, maybe just a very, very fucking good story. And then, of course, I mean, what the story is about and how it's, played out during the course of the game is very fucking good. The only thing that's, really hurts the story is actually the real end. I mean, there's an end and then there's the real end. And that's really isn't all that good. It ends on a cliffhanger, and well, they did, answer a lot, and you get everything confirmed in it, but it still, feels like, well, couldn't they, explain a bit more? But in conclusion, the story is a very interesting story. It really keeps you hooked right off the bat. You can think about and figure out a lot, and in the end, the twist still won't. I mean, you still won't see the twist coming, and when it comes, it's a very, very fucking good twist, which makes the story even better. The characters aren't really that big of an issue, but they're still there and they are good. Of course, the gameplay helps the atmosphere to make it feel realistic. I mean, the whole atmosphere is just this realistic approach, which really makes those horror scenes even better than they well, they aren't really all that good, but the atmosphere really makes it so much better. But in the end, I wouldn't really call this a horror game, just a very good story-driven game, to be honest, because the gameplay can't really survive on its own, I think. I mean, I haven't seen it, but I don't think so, because it's really started dying in the middle of the game. Just the same with the scary scenes, but eventually got even more fucked up than they already were, and then the story was getting even better than it already were, and well, that's just that. I wouldn't really call it a horror game, just a very fucked up fucking story, but in a good way. But in conclusion, I mean, with the whole game, both the story and the gameplay is almost on the same level during the whole game, which makes it even which is really fucking good, to be honest. The gameplay is very good because of the realistic tactical aspect of the game, and the slow mode really makes makes it more intense than it already is. And really helps the story to makes you keep on the edge all the time, which gives the story more insight than it already is. And in the end, being one of the best games. I mean, very fucking good game. So as a standalone game, I mean, just F.E.A.R, not any of the expansion. It's a fantastic game. It really is a fantastic game. It isn't really close to be a masterpiece. I mean, if it's going to be a masterpiece, they really need to deploy it better than it already. I mean, it could have been, but like interacting and everything, and really more weapons and shit to keep the gameplay more interesting, and never really losing the gameplay. But like I said, it's a fantastic game.
What do you think, Jen?
There was a lot of anger in this room.
That's great. Got anything useful to add?
I don't see any bullet holes. There's no brass.
With the first expansion pack, Extraction Point, the only thing they added with the gameplay was a couple of new enemies and a couple of new weapons, but that's just standard. So you shouldn't really praise that shit. But the biggest difference between those games are the atmosphere. I don't know if it was the environment or the pacing, but what I do know is that the atmosphere is not the same it was in the first game. They kinda destroyed it. And that really changed the whole fucking game, to be honest. I mean, the greatest thing about the first game was the atmosphere. I mean, how it connected with the gameplay and always keeping you on the edge. But now when the atmosphere wasn't really the same, you weren't really on the edge all the time, which just destroys all the horror sequences. because like I said before, F.E.A.R isn't really a horror game, to be honest. It's more like a tactical first-person shooter with a very fucking great, good story. I mean, those sequences weren't scary, but because of the gameplay and because of the realism and the atmosphere, at least it keeps you on the edge all the time. But with the first expansion pack, it's completely gone. And like I said before, that was what made the first game fantastic. And also, I've been thinking with what I said about the first game. When I said that the story and the gameplay was on the same level, I don't really agree anymore. The gameplay wasn't really all that good. The gameplay was great in the first game, but the story was fantastic. But it was still, a fantasy game. I just wanted to clear that out. But anyway, the expansion pack Extraction Point. I mean, the whole point, why the game was fantastic in the first place is completely gone now, so the gameplay just, yeah, to be honest. But what about the story then? Well, the game starts out exactly when the first game ended, to be honest. I mean, when the original game ended. And just to point out, the story was fantastic in the first game because it was about, this experiment with All-Man, Paxton and all that shit that, during the course of the game you start seeing the truth and everything and start, who's really the bad guy and everything. And eventually they, of course, finish the story, they confirm it and everything, and it's fantastic. But this story, what happens when Alma is free, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Neither do they explain shit either. But anyway, in Extraction Point, it becomes a rollercoaster story. In comparison with the first game, there was, an ordinary story which you figure out during the way, and it was fantastic. This, I don't really get it, because in the beginning it was a rollercoaster story, but then near the end almost, it's pretty short. They started questioning again, but you don't know shit because they haven't really given you anything to think about. Which is kind of weird because they started killing off a lot of fucking characters. The good thing with that was that the characters was, good. You felt a bit, emotional. And to be honest, some of those scenes were actually the only fucking horror scenes or a bit scary scenes. I mean, the only scenes that really, had a bit of horror in it. But to what end, why did it die? They never really explained it, to be honest, so it doesn't really lead to anything. I mean, they just kill. It feels like the whole point of that game was just to kill off so many people as humanly possible. I mean, it's not good. I mean, eventually, when you, I guess, know a specific numbers of dead people, eventually you might get something out of it. But in this game, no. So in conclusion, the gameplay is not as good as it was in the first game. Or well, it's the same, but they should have, done some more than just, kick open doors and shit. The fantastic atmosphere is completely gone. You can't find it anywhere. Some instances you might be able to feel it, but it's not there. The story doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. You don't really understand what's going on. They don't really give you any information either. In the end, you might, think, well, oh, maybe it was about that, but then, maybe it really wasn't. They never really confirmed anything. To be honest, it feels like they were just trying to squeeze out more money out of F.E.A.R, to be honest, but that's just me. But F.E.A.R Extraction Point is still a good game, borderline to just a mediocre piece of shit. Just like the first game was just a fantastic game, but borderline for just being a great game. I mean, why the first game was fantastic was only because the atmosphere that really kept you on the edge. Of course, it's a personal question, but you should have that atmosphere. I mean, or you can just say fuck it, but it's still fantastic, the first game. While the first expansion pack is just good. I mean, it felt like they were trying to, loosen up all the ends and shit, but they just made it worse. So, F.E.A.R Extraction Point, it's a good game. Oh yeah, just to note, Extraction Point is only a good game because it needs the first game. I mean, it doesn't build up anything on its own. That's why it's a good game. If this was, a standalone game, then I would say this is a horrible fucking game, to be honest. But no, because it needs the first game and because the first game was that fucking good, great I mean, therefore this game is good.
Sucks.
And finally, in the second and last expansion pack, Perseus Mandate, they added like always a couple of new enemies and weapons to the gameplay, and that's about it for the gameplay. I mean, the atmosphere still isn't like it was in the first game, but then again they don't really focus a hell of a lot on those horror sequences like they did in the original in the first expansion pack. It felt like the game wanted to be what it really was, just a first-person shooter, and they did it very well. But the biggest difference is that they give you a completely new story. I mean, not really, it's kind of parallel to the first game story and everything, but it's still, you know, something different. I mean, in comparison to the first expansion pack, which just followed with the first game ended, original game ended. But anyway, the story is a roller coaster story, a good roller coaster story in comparison to what the first expansion pack was. This is really a roller coaster story. You're, you know, tasked to find some shit, and then you find that shit and it's all over. A couple of twists and turns along the way, but in the end it's all over. I mean, that's just it. And another big difference with the gameplay, which I remember now, is that this game actually has a final boss battle in comparison to the original game in the first expansion pack, which didn't. I mean, you can say that the Perseus Mandate is more gameplay driven than the second, and I mean where the first game was, which is just story driven, to be honest. But anyway, back to the story. There are some new characters in this game, which they make very good, which they actually use, you know, in comparison to the second expansion pack, which they just, you know, didn't use them, you know, they kill them off, but you know, for what real reason? I mean, they really used the characters, and they really did a good job at it. I mean, you were in a squad and everything, and they, you know, did a successful job at making you feel connected to the squad. The story was also good to the F.E.A.R universe. It really, I mean, it showed, you know, a bit of more backstory about this experiment and shit, which strengthens the whole universe. Another nice touch is that in some areas or levels you go through, it's exactly the same level as you went through in the first expansion pack, Extraction Point, and that's just a nice touch, to be honest. It's not really anything to, you know, matter if the game's good or not, but it's a nice touch. Well, there isn't really that much else with Perseus Mandate. It's kind of easy to, you know, figure out and everything. It's just a roller coaster, an ordinary fucking game that is, but it's still a very good one. So I gotta say that Perseus Mandate, it's a great game. It's not fantastic because it doesn't really have the same connection which the first game had, because it's still, you know, in comparison to those. I mean, to that game. Okay, but in the end, now you heard everything, you know, individually, all the first F.E.A.R games, I mean the first F.E.A.R game and all the expansion packs, I mean how they are individually. So you can kind of say that the first game was, you know, the glory, and the abomination with the Extraction Point and back to its own glory was Perseus Mandate. But the whole game just started deteriorating from the first game. I mean, the first game was fantastic, it really had this good atmosphere, which really made those spooky scenes, you know, matter. I mean, horror, because this isn't really a horror game, I would call it. I mean, if they sell it like a horror game, then they haven't really done a good job. If they sold it as a first-person shooter, then, well, yeah, that's a good job. And with the story, I mean, the story was great in the first game. I mean, it was only about this experiment and shit. That was fantastic. But then in Extraction Point, when it started to become another story about Alma going free, it didn't make any goddamn sense. It didn't explain shit either. But in Perseus Mandate, it kinda continued what the first game had, or just give more information about that shit. But in the end, I mean, in the conclusion, I would say that the first F.E.A.R game and all the expansion packs together, it's a great game. I mean, it started deteriorating. I mean, just like I said, I mean, it was, you know, fantastic in the beginning, but then it just started deteriorating, all that shit. But the gameplay is still, you know, good, but it wasn't like it was in the first game. So yeah, F.E.A.R, I mean, all the F.E.A.R first games together are great.